5 men vanished into the darkness of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Their car was found abandoned. Their bodies discovered months later, scattered across the wilderness. One of them curled up in a trailer, surrounded by food. Yet, he starved to death. One was never found at all. No clear motive, no confirmed suspects, no satisfying explanation. Only questions, and the silence of the snow. Welcome to the Friday Night Campfire Stories, the place where the shadows get a little deeper and the truth is always a little stranger than fiction. You are watching my series, Far From Fiction, my deep dive series into the eerie, unexplained, and the truly haunting cases from real life. Tonight's case is one of the most baffling cold cases in American history. A story of friendship, mystery, and a deadly detour. This is the story of the Yuba County Five. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. I'm on the road to 1,000 subscribers and my goal is to get there by the end of August. So, if you love chilling mysteries and real-life horror, help me grow this campfire community. But let's waste no more time. This is Far From Fiction. Before their names were etched into one of the strangest mysteries in American history, they were just 5 friends. 5 men from Yuba City, California. Tight-knit, kind-hearted, and all living with various developmental or psychological disabilities. They loved basketball. They loved being together. And they were excited about one thing: their upcoming basketball tournament sponsored by the Special Olympics. Theodore, 32 years old. He was a sweet-natured, friendly, and had a love for the Raiders and the Beatles. Ted had a mild intellectual disabilities and lived with his parents, who adored him. Jack, 30, a U.S. Army veteran, described as fiercely loyal. Jack didn't have diagnosed disabilities, but his mother said he was a slow learner. He was protective of his friends, and he owned the turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego they'd ride in that night. William Bill Sterling, 29, Ted's best friend. He was deeply religious, quiet, and gentle. He had spent time in Napa State Hospital in his youth, but had turned his life around. Jackie Hewitt, 24, the youngest of the group, shy, with a childlike innocence. He loved listening to the radio and watching game shows with his family. Gary Mathias, 25, the wild card of the group, a former U.S. Army soldier who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, but he had been stable for 2 years, working with his stepfather and regularly taking his medication. His bond with the group was strong. The 5 were thrilled to be playing in this basketball tournament in Sacramento, California. It was scheduled for the morning of February 25th. They had their uniforms laid out the night before, packed snacks, and they talked about it all week. A win for them meant a free trip to Los Angeles. For them, it was their NBA Finals. But on the night of February 24th, 1978, they decided to take a quick trip up north to Chico, about 50 miles away, to watch a college basketball game at California State University. The UC Davis Aggies were playing. The guys were fans. After the game, they stopped at a local convenience store just before closing to grab snacks, Hostess pies, sodas, and candy bars. Then, they got back in Jack's car. And then, they just vanished. The morning of February 25th came and went. The tournament the boys had been so excited for began without them. Their families waited by the phone, expecting a call, a check-in, some kind of explanation. But it never came, and panic began to set in. When all 5 men failed to return home that day, their families knew something was wrong. This wasn't like them. They weren't reckless. They had never done anything like this before. By that night, they were officially reported missing. Search efforts began immediately. Police and volunteers traced their route from Yuba City to Chico. But what they found the next day only deepened the mystery. 4 days after they had disappeared, on February 28th, the investigators found Jack's car. a 1969 turquoise and white Mercury Montego, abandoned in a remote area of the Plumas National Forest. The car was 70 miles from Chico, 70 miles in the wrong direction, up a twisting road, unfamiliar, snow-covered, and dangerously isolated. The car wasn't stuck. It had a quarter tank of gas, the keys were gone, but the engine was still in working condition. The tire tracks showed no sign of skidding or struggling through the snow. It was as if they had calmly pulled over and walked away. But why would 5 men, unprepared for the cold, abandon a working vehicle? And more importantly, why were they up there to begin with? They were heading home from Chico, due south, but the car was found in the northeast, high in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Not a logical detour, not a shortcut. It just made no sense. The families were devastated and confused. Some believed the men had been chased. Others thought that they may have been picked up by someone who lured them off course. But with no signs of a struggle, no witnesses, and no footprints in the melting snow, the trail went cold. For months, the forest held its secrets. And then, summer came. And with the thaw came answers. Answers that raised even more questions. Nearly 4 months had passed since they disappeared. Then, on June 4th, 1978, a group of motorcyclists riding through the forest made a gruesome discovery. A broken window, a faint smell, and a body inside an abandoned Forest Service trailer, deep in the woods. It was the body of Ted. He was lying on a bed, tucked under 8 sheets. His feet were badly frostbitten, almost rotten. His beard had grown out. His body was thin, but the details that disturbed investigators the most was what was surrounding him. Inside the trailer were rations meant to last for an entire year. Canned food, dehydrated meals, enough to keep Ted alive for weeks, even months. Yet, he had starved to death. A nearby logbook had indicated that he may have survived up to 13 weeks after the group had first vanished. The trailer also had a working propane tank. All they had to do was light the stove, but they never did. As search crews fanned out from the trailer, they began to find the others. Roughly 11 miles from where the car had been abandoned lays the bodies of Jack and Bill. They were found on opposite sides of the road, about 4.5 miles from the car. They had likely died of hypothermia. There was no sign of violence, only the cold. They had tried to walk back or forward, but the deep snow, with no gear, no light, they never stood a chance. 2 days later, investigators found Jackie Hewitt, or rather, parts of him. His remains were scattered in the forest, about 2 miles from the trailer. Only bones remained. Nearby, his shoes, a flashlight, and his jacket. 4 bodies recovered, but yet still one was missing. Gary Mathias. His sneakers were found in the trailer next to Ted's bed, but Gary himself was nowhere to be found. No body, no signs, nothing. To this day, his remains have never been discovered. 5 men went into the woods, 4 were found dead, 1 simply vanished. And even now, decades later, nothing about their final days makes sense. Why would 5 men drive deep into the mountains, walk through a blizzard, and willingly abandon safety, shelter, and even food? The facts are clear, but the truth, that's where things get murky. The most basic theory is the least satisfying. They simply got lost. After leaving Chico, maybe they took a wrong turn, ended up in the mountains by accident. Once stuck in the snow, maybe they panicked and tried to find help, and one by one, they succumbed to the cold. But here's the problem. These men weren't reckless. Jack hated the cold. He would never intentionally drive into the mountains. Also, they passed multiple towns and open businesses along the way, warm, lit up, and alive, before reaching that remote area. Why didn't they stop anywhere and ask for help? Could it be that one of them stepped up and knew where they were, or at least thought that they knew where they were, only to end up getting more lost than when they started? The part that confused me about this theory is why they would split up. I guess they could each be looking in a different direction, but to travel 11 miles in the bitter cold, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Some believe they were forced off the road, being chased by someone, possibly a hitchhiker, or maybe even someone from the game. They were rooting for the away team, which in sports, something that a lot of people don't really care for. And some people do get very violent when it comes to that. But at the same time, it is not two prominent schools playing each other, so it's kind of unlikely that this would be the case, but still, it is a possibility. This would explain the car's strange location. Maybe they were running, hiding, escaping something or someone. But if that's true, where was the struggle? Why were there no signs of a fight, no fingerprints? And why lead them 19 miles into the woods? Why not just take care of them the first couple miles and then go back to your car and back into civilization? One local man reported seeing the group with another person the night they disappeared. He claimed that he saw a red pickup truck at the gas station, and later that same night, walking along the road with a woman and a baby. But his story changed, and authorities could never verify it. Could someone have lured them into the woods, though? There's never been any solid leads and no suspects, no known enemies, just questions and more silence. And of course, there wouldn't be a cold case without fringe theories. Some say it was aliens, others claim it was a government experiment gone wrong, and the men were witnesses to something that they should have never seen. Wild as it may sound, people do often reach for the unbelievable when the believable just doesn't make sense. Then there's the scariest explanation. It could have been a planned attack by Gary Mathias. This was the theory back in the 70s when the event took place. The news seemed to try to paint it as such. Since Gary had schizophrenia and had to take medication, they believed that he could have had an episode and plotted a plan to kill off his friends. He may have had close friendships with Ted, which is why Ted survived for so long, while he led the others to their death, being stranded in the mountains left for the weather and frostbite. This also explains why he was never found. He had just left. There was evidence that he was with Ted in the shelter at some point, but had left. Maybe he was the one that told Ted not to eat any of the food because maybe it was poisonous or expired. Although this was the news' favorite explanation, I find it hard to believe. Gary was on meds for 2 years, heavily administered by his stepfather, to ensure that he wouldn't have an episode. It's possible that Gary did have an episode later on before Ted's death, if he was with Ted in the shelter, as it had been weeks since they'd vanished, meaning that he had never taken his medication in that time frame. But I don't believe that that was the reason for them being there in the first place. The Yuba County Five didn't just vanish. They left behind a breadcrumb trail of contradiction. Men who were close friends, who had families, routines, and dreams. They entered the forest on a quiet February night, and they were not seen alive again. When I look at everything, the facts, the location, the items found, the behaviors, I think there is a likely explanation as far as I'm concerned. It's important to note I am not an investigator, I wasn't on the case or anything, so this is just my opinion, but this is the best thing that I could come up with about what happened. I believe that the 5 men did get stuck in the snow. I know the reports early on when they found the car said that the car wasn't stuck, but I do believe, there could be a source of panic. You're lost, you're going up a mountain, maybe they did slide a little bit, maybe they weren't fully stuck, but may have been something that made them think, okay, we're stuck, I can't go any forward because we're going to slide down this hill and we're going to crash. Also, it had been 4 days since they found the car, since when they went missing, so there's a very good chance that it was much worse conditions 4 days ago as opposed to when they found it. They even said the snow had started to kind of melt a little bit. In a panic, I do believe they started to go look for help somewhere. They started looking in the forest, but again, they didn't know the location, so they abandoned the vehicle and went in the woods in search of help. I believe that 5 of them all did stick together and they all found the forestation together. But this is where the tragedy kind of sets in. This is my best guess, is that the 5 of them couldn't stay there forever, and so I believe 3 of them, maybe 1, and then 2 went afterwards, started to leave and started to say, okay, I'm going to go look for help somewhere. But again, they're traveling deeper into the forest, looking either for the car or looking for signs of help, but just never found it. They kept walking and walking, and eventually when darkness started to fall in, they were looking for the shelter or the car or something, but they couldn't find it. I believe all that was left in the forest shelter was Gary and Ted. I believe Ted, they were trying to protect more than anything, so they had told him to just stay put and they will go get help. And I believe they wanted to keep somebody with him, so that's why I believe that Gary was with him. And then there's the topic of why didn't they get into the food? Why didn't they use the propane heaters? Any of that. But it has been said before, but it's worth repeating. People with developmental disabilities often respect rules. If they were told or even believed that the supplies in the trailer was not theirs, they more than likely would not have touched it. It's heartbreaking to imagine, but it is possible that one of the men, maybe even Ted, insisted that they leave the food and the heaters alone. Now, while Gary and Ted stayed in the shelter, the 3 men obviously would have lost their lives and succumbed to the weather and frostbite. The one part that does kind of throw me off is I don't know how they would have survived so long in the shelter. It is possible. I mean, obviously there was snow on the ground, so they could have just eaten snow, which would have quenched their hydration, even though it's not sanitary. It is something that still could have quenched their hydration at least, and maybe that was enough to help them live for as long as they did. I also am not sure how long Gary was there. Again, being off his medicine, it is possible that he did have an episode and just vanished into the woods at some point, leaving Ted alone, waiting for his friends to return. But I think it's also possible that he stayed there with Ted until Ted had passed away, or at least he thought that he had passed away. And I think this is the more likely explanation, given that Gary's shoes were left behind. I believe it's possible that maybe Gary's shoes weren't that good, or maybe Ted had superior shoes for the conditions, and he decided he was going to take Ted's shoes since he had already passed away, or at least he thought that he had passed away. And then once again, where did Gary go from there? We unfortunately may never know that answer. What happened in the Plumas National Forest that winter night remains one of the strangest mysteries in American history. But at the center of it all were 5 men who didn't deserve what happened to them. Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Jack Hewitt, Ted Wheeler, Gary Mathias. They were sons, brothers, friends, men who loved sports, snacks, and joking with each other. They were each vulnerable, but they weren't helpless. They had routines, they had dreams, and they had each other. And somehow, through the chain of missteps and misunderstandings, they ended up lost in a place where none of them should have gone. May they never be forgotten. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Far From Fiction here on the Friday Night Campfire Stories YouTube channel. If you found this case as compelling and heartbreaking as I did, I'd really appreciate you if you hit that subscribe button. As I stated earlier, I'm on the road to 1,000 subscribers and would like to hit that goal by the end of August. Every view, every like, and every comment means the world to me. If you have any theories on what could have happened to the Yuba 5, I would love to hear it in the comment section below. As always, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, some of the darkest stories are the ones that never got their endings. I will see you next time, and as always, thank you for spending a little bit of your evening here with me.